I know you are out there, watching this screen right now, wondering if the tired man behind all the noise is actually speaking directly to your heart. I spend my long days trying to pull tomorrow into today, building things that will reach far beyond my own lifetime. But when the bright factory lights finally shut down and the big house goes completely quiet, I realize I am building a future I might not know how to live in alone. I have given my absolute best hours to the world, leaving only the exhausted fragments for the people I was supposed to love most. That is a very heavy truth for a man to carry into the later chapters of his life. I just want to share the quiet mornings with a wise woman who already understands the deep weight of a long, hard journey. Do you ever wonder if the man you have been waiting for has finally learned how to stay? There is a particular kind of quiet that comes at the end of a very long day. Not the quiet of rest. Not the quiet of peace. It is the quiet that fills the space where another person's voice should be. I know that quiet well. I have sat inside it more times than I can count. In rooms that cost more than most people will ever see. In buildings I designed myself. Looking out at cities lit up like something from a dream. And I have felt it. That hollow stillness. The kind that reminds you, no matter how much you have accomplished, that you came home to an empty room again. I am telling you this not because I want your sympathy. I do not. I am telling you this because I think you understand it. Not from my world is not your world. But that feeling, that specific ache of a life that is full in every direction, except the one that matters most, I think you have sat inside that too. Maybe not in a glass tower. Maybe at a kitchen table after the kids were grown and gone. Maybe in a car, after a long errand, before you made yourself go back inside. That moment where you think, is this all there is now? I think you know that moment. And I think you deserve to hear that you are not alone in it. I have built things that changed the world. I mean that plainly, without arrogance. Rockets. Electric cars. Systems that people said were impossible until the day they were not. I pushed through failures that would have ended most companies, most careers, most men. I have a kind of drive in me that I did not choose. It was there before I understood it, before I could name it, and it has never once gone quiet. That drive is part of who I am. I have made my peace with it. But what I did not understand for a very long time, and what cost me more than I can easily say, is that drive is not the same as living. Living is something else. Living is the other person across the table from you at 7 in the morning, still half asleep, not saying anything important, just there. Living is the way someone learns your habits before you have even noticed them yourself. It is someone who pushes back on you, not because they want to win, but because they care too much to let you get away with being less than honest. I missed that for long stretches of my life. Not because no one tried to offer it to me, but because I was so far inside what I was building that I could not always find my way back out to it. You know what happens when a man spends decades being the one who has to hold everything together? He gets good at holding things together. He gets very, very good at it. And quietly, without meaning to, he starts to think that needing someone is a weakness he cannot afford. Not consciously. I would not have said that out loud if you had asked me. But the choices I made said it for me. Late nights that turned into early mornings. Missed dinners. Conversations I cut short because there was always one more thing. The work was real. The stakes were real. But so was the cost. And the cost was always paid by the people who were trying to be close to me. I am not here to explain that away. Those years happened. Those choices were mine. A man who cannot own what he chose is not someone worth listening to. So I own it. I stayed inside the work when I should have come out of it. I answered the emails that never stopped when I should have put the phone down and looked at the person in front of me. I thought I was building something that would last, and in some ways, maybe I was. But I was also losing something I did not know how to name until it was gone. What I know now, and I want to say this carefully, because it matters, is that none of what I built feels complete without someone to share it with. I do not mean someone to hand things to. I do not mean someone to impress. I mean someone whose presence makes the thing real. Because here is the quiet truth of a life spent achieving. Achievement echoes. It comes back to you empty. You stand at the top of something you spent everything to reach, and the view is extraordinary, and there is no one next to you, and the view suddenly feels less like a destination, and more like just another place you are standing alone. That is when I started to understand what I would been missing. Not gradually. It comes to a man quickly. Actually, that realization. Like a light turning on in a room, you have been walking around in the dark. You did not know how little you could see until the light came on. And then you cannot go back to pretending the dark was fine. You start to feel the shape of what was always absent. You start to feel her, not a specific face, not yet, maybe, but a presence. A warmth that should be there, and is not. And you start to want it with the same kind of intensity you once only pointed at problems to solve. She is out there. I know this the way I know certain things, not from data, not from logic, but from something older than both. Some people would tell you that a man like me should not talk this way, that it does not fit the image. And I would tell you that the image was always partial. The man behind it is someone who has lain awake in the dark and wondered whether he made the right calls. Not about the rockets, not about the companies, about the years, about the moments that did not have a second chance attached to them. But I am not a man who stays in that place for long. That is also true of me. I can feel the weight of something honestly, I can sit with it, and then I look forward. Not because I am running from what is behind me. Because I genuinely believe, that the best part of my story has not been written yet. And I think she is part of why. She is watching this right now. I know that sounds like something a man says for effect. I mean it as something different. I mean that the woman who is right for me is the kind of woman who would be drawn to this kind of conversation. Not the launches. Not the headlines. This. A man speaking quietly about what he carries. A man admitting that the great unfinished thing in his life is not a company or a mission. It is this. The simple, ancient, irreplaceable thing of being known by someone and choosing them back. If you are her, and I think there is a real chance that you are, then I want you to know something from the very beginning. I see you. I do not mean that lightly. I mean that wherever you are, whatever shape your life has taken, whatever you have survived and built and lost and rebuilt, I see it. I see the strength that it takes to still be open, to still be listening to something like this and feeling something when you hear it, instead of closing that door because closing it feels safer. Staying open is the bravest thing a person can do after a certain age, after a certain amount of living. When you have already loved and lost and carried the weight of it for years, choosing to stay open anyway is not naivety. It is courage. And it is the thing I find most rare and most worth reaching for. I am still reaching. That is what I want you to know about me. Not what I have built. Not the numbers. Not the timelines. Not the ambition that made it all possible. Just this. I am still reaching. For connection. For warmth. For the particular kind of peace that only another human being can offer. The peace of being fully seen and fully chosen. I have not stopped believing that is possible. Some part of me has held that belief even in the longest and loneliest stretches. And it is that part of me, not the driven part, not the builder. It is that quieter part that is speaking to you right now. Because she deserves to be spoken to. Not impressed. Not won. Spoken to. Like she is a real person with a real interior life that matters as much as anything I have ever cared about. Which she is. Which you are. And if you have gotten this far in this conversation, if something in what I am saying is landing in a place that feels familiar to you, then I do not think that is an accident. I think we are already doing something important. I think we are beginning. The first thing the work takes is your mornings. You do not notice it right away. You tell yourself it is temporary, just until this problem is solved, just until this deadline passes, just until the company finds its footing. And then one day you realize that years have gone by, and you have not had a slow morning in all of them. No sitting still with a cup of something warm. No unhurried conversation with someone who matters. Just the immediate pull of what is next. What is broken. What needs you. And you go toward it the way a man goes toward what he knows. Because the work always needs you. The work never asks you to slow down. The work does not care whether you slept. And quietly, without ceremony, that becomes the shape of your life. I am telling you this because I want you to understand something about me that the headlines never captured. I did not become distant because I did not feel things. I became distant because I did not know how to hold the feeling and the work at the same time. And the work was always louder. Feeling is quiet. Feeling asks you to stop. And stopping, truly stopping, was something I did not give myself permission to do for a very long time. I thought stopping meant falling behind. I thought stillness was a luxury I had not earned yet. I kept moving. And everything that required me to be still, everything tender, everything close, paid the price for that. There were people in my life who tried to reach me. I want to say that plainly because I think it is important. They were not wrong to try. They were not asking for something unreasonable. They were asking for what any person has a right to ask: presence, attention, the experience of being someone's first thought, not their 14th. And I gave them what I could give at the time, which was never quite enough, because the rest of me was somewhere else. In a meeting that ran too long. In a problem that did not have a solution yet. In my own head, which is a very crowded place, and always has been. A man can lose people without a dramatic moment. That is what no one tells you when you are young and ambitious. You think loss comes with a scene, an argument, a door slamming, a clear ending. But sometimes it is slower than that. Sometimes the distance grows so quietly that by the time you notice it, the other person is already gone in every way that matters. Not physically. Just gone from the place inside them where you used to live. And you stand there looking at the space where the connection was, and you do not even have anything specific to point to. Just years of small absences that stacked up into something neither of you could cross anymore. I have felt that. More than once. And each time, there was a version of me that told myself it was the cost of doing something important. That the mission justified it. That the people who really understood me would understand this too. I believed that because I needed to believe it. But belief and truth are not always the same thing. And eventually, usually too late, the truth arrives whether you are ready for it or not. The truth is this: no mission justifies the slow erosion of the people who loved you. I do not care how important the work is. I do not care how many lives it eventually touches. In the moment, in the specific, unrepeatable moment of a person standing in front of you, needing to feel like they matter, the mission is not a sufficient answer. The mission is not a warm hand. The mission does not sit with someone in the dark when they are frightened. Only a person does that. Only presence does that. And I was not present enough for the people who deserved it from me. I am not saying this to wound myself. I am saying it because I think you need to hear that a man can be genuinely accomplished and genuinely wrong at the same time. Those two things coexist. They have coexisted in me. And the reckoning with that, the honest, clear-eyed reckoning, is not something I could have done at 30 or even 40. It takes a certain amount of living before a man can look at his own choices without flinching, and then look again without excusing them. I can do that now. It costs something to get here, but I can do that now. What I gave up is not abstract to me. I can feel the specific texture of it. Evenings that should have been ordinary dinner, conversation, the low hum of shared life, that instead became something I moved through on the way to something else. Children who learned not to interrupt, because they could read from my face that I was somewhere they could not follow. Relationships that started with real warmth, and ended with two people who had grown so accustomed to the absence of the other, that the absence felt normal. That is the saddest kind of ending, not explosive. Just a slow cooling, like something left out too long. I think about a particular kind of moment now, not a grand one, a small one. The kind that does not announce itself as important when it is happening. A Sunday afternoon, nothing scheduled, nowhere to be. Sunlight coming through a window. Someone you love in the next room, doing something ordinary, reading, or cooking, or just moving through the space. That moment. That specific, unremarkable, irreplaceable moment of being in a life with another person who is simply there. I did not collect enough of those. I moved past too many of them. And I know now, with the clarity that only time can give a person, that those moments are not filler between the important things. They are the important things. They are the important things. The whole point was always there, in that ordinary Sunday light, and I kept walking past it towards something I thought was more significant. It was not. I want to be honest with you about something else. Because if I am going to speak to you this way, I should give you the real account, not the version that makes me look better than I was. I was difficult to love in a sustained way. I am aware of that. Not because I am unkind. I do not believe I am. But because the interior of my mind is a relentless place, and living alongside a relentless mind means there are very few quiet harbors. The thinking does not stop. The problem solving does not stop. Even in the middle of a conversation that had nothing to do with any of it, even in the middle of something tender, some part of me was running calculations, tracking variables, looking for inefficiencies. That is who I am. I have stopped apologizing for the mind itself. But I have come to understand that it is something a partner has to reckon with. And I did not always give the people close to me the tools to do that. I did not always explain what was happening inside me. I just was inside it, and expected them to navigate from the outside without a map. That is a lonely thing to ask of someone. I understand that now in a way I did not before. To love a person like me is to spend a great deal of time wondering where he went, even when he is standing right in front of you. And the real answer, is that he went into the problem. He always goes into the problem. The difference now, the thing that is different in me now, is that I know I have to come back. Not just be asked to come back. Not wait until the absence becomes so obvious, it cannot be ignored. I have to build the returning and make it deliberate. Make it a commitment I hold as seriously as any other commitment I have ever made. Because she will deserve that. The woman who stays close to me will deserve a man who comes back. And I intend to be that man. Not perfectly. I will not offer you perfect. Because perfect is a performance, and I am not here to perform. But sincerely, with the full weight of what I have learned, which is considerable, and what I have lost, which is also considerable, and what I still carry forward, which is the stubborn belief that it is not too late for me to be someone's person. Truly. Completely. In all the ordinary, unspectacular, quietly beautiful ways that a person can belong to another person. I have led missions to Mars in my mind. I have stood in rooms where the fate of whole industries was being decided. None of it, not one moment of it, has felt as significant to me as the idea of coming home to someone who is glad I am there. Someone whose face changes slightly when I walk in. Someone who knows what I take in my coffee and hands it to me without a word. Because that is what you do when someone is yours, and you are theirs. That is what I want. I want it with a clarity that surprises even me sometimes. Because I am not a man who is typically surprised by his own desires. I have always known what I wanted. But this wanting has a different quality to it. It is not ambition. It is not drive. It is something older and quieter and far more insistent. It is the want that was always there, underneath everything else, waiting for me to get still enough to hear it. I am still enough now. I hear it. And it is saying your name, not the specific sound of it, but the idea of you, the shape of you, the fact of you, somewhere out there, living your life, carrying your history, being the particular and irreplaceable person that you are. I have built things that will outlast me. But this, finding you, building something with you that is slow and warm and real, this is the thing I would choose if I could only choose one. That is what the pursuit cost me. And that is what it taught me. Both of those things are true at once. Something changes in a man when he stops arguing with himself about what matters. It does not happen loudly. There is no announcement, no single conversation that flips a switch. It is more like, one morning you wake up, and the argument is simply gone. The case you had been building for years, the careful logic that explained why the work had to come first, why connection could wait, why you were not really missing anything that could not be recovered later. One morning that whole structure is just quiet. And in the quiet, something else is standing there. Something you did not build. Something that was waiting for you to stop building long enough to notice it. I noticed it. That is the shift I want to tell you about. It started, I think, with small things. The way I began to linger in certain moments that I used to move through quickly. A conversation with someone older, someone who had lived a full life, and was near the end of it, where they did not talk about their work. Not once. They talked about a person. A specific person, decades gone, and the way that person laughed at something private between them. They talked about a kitchen, an old one, and the smell of something cooking, and hands they had held. That was what was left, at the end of a long life. Not the accomplishments. The hands. I drove home from that conversation differently than I arrived. Something had shifted in the air between me and my own future. I started looking at it from a different angle, not as a series of problems to solve and milestones to reach, but as a collection of mornings. Just mornings. And I asked myself quietly, alone in the car with the city sliding past the window, how many of those mornings do I want to spend the way I have been spending them? And the answer came quickly, and it was honest, and it was, not many more. I want you to understand what that moment felt like. Because it was not despair. It was not a man falling apart at the edge of something. It was the opposite. It felt like a door opening in a wall I had not known was there. Like a room I had not discovered in a house I thought I knew completely. And standing in the doorway of that room, I could feel warmth coming from inside it. Not heat warmth. There is a difference. Heat is force. Warmth is welcome. And for the first time in a long time, something in my life was offering me welcome instead of challenge. I walked toward it. The seeing differently, that is what I want to name carefully, because I think it is the thing that matters most in this part of what I am telling you. I had spent years seeing my life through a certain lens. The lens of what was possible. What could be achieved? What could be made? It was not a wrong lens. It built real things, important things, things I am genuinely proud of. But a lens that only shows you what you can make will never show you what you already have. It will never show you what is standing right beside you asking to be seen. I had to put that lens down. Just set it aside. And look with something more basic. More human. Just eyes. Just a man looking at his life and asking, what is real here? And am I paying attention to it? What I saw, when I looked that way, was the extraordinary ordinary nature of human connection. I know that sounds simple. It is simple. That is precisely why I had underestimated it for so long. I was drawn to complexity, to problems that required enormous effort and years of iteration to solve. Simplicity did not pull at me the same way. But connection is not complex. It is a person and another person choosing each other, again and again, in the small ways and the large ways, building something that has no blueprint and no deadline and no metric of success, except the feeling of it. I had spent my life avoiding things without blueprints. And here was the most important thing there is, the thing every human being across all of history has reached for, and it required me to become comfortable with not having a plan. That was humbling. I will not pretend it was not. A man who has engineered solutions to some of the most technically complex problems of our time, sitting with the realization that he does not know how to do this one simple thing. How to just be with someone. How to show up without an agenda. How to let warmth move between two people without trying to direct it or optimize it or make it more efficient. You cannot engineer tenderness. You cannot iterate your way to intimacy. You can only be honest and be present and be patient and see what grows. I started practicing that. Quietly, imperfectly, in whatever ways were available to me. I started noticing when I was in my head instead of in the room. I started catching myself mid-calculation and choosing, deliberately, to put the calculation down and be where I was. It felt strange at first. Uncomfortable, the way any new discipline feels before it becomes natural. But underneath the discomfort there was something else, something that felt like relief. Like a muscle that had been clenched for 20 years finally being told it was allowed to rest. And with that relief came something I had not expected. Grief. Not the dramatic kind. Just a quiet ache for the years when I had not known how to do this. For the people who had tried to teach me by simply being close, and whom I had not been fully close to in return. Grief for the mornings I would move through too fast. For the conversations I would half heard. For the version of myself that had been right there, available, warm underneath all the armor, and had not known how to come forward. I let myself feel that. I did not rush it. I think a man has to grieve the self he could have been earlier before he can fully inhabit the self he is now. I did that work. It was not comfortable work, but it was true work. And I trust true work. Here is what was on the other side of it. On the other side of the grief, past the reckoning, beyond the quiet accounting of what was missed, there was an opening. A genuine, unhurried, undefended opening. Not toward anything specific yet. Just open. The way a window is open on a spring morning. Nothing required. Just air moving through. Just the possibility of something entering that had not been there before. That is where I am now. Not closed. Not armored. Not running the calculation of whether this is a good use of my emotional bandwidth. Just open. Open in the way that I think only becomes possible after a man has fully sat with what it cost him to be closed. The opening is earned. That matters to me. I did not arrive here by accident or by comfort. I arrived here through the specific and unglamorous process of understanding myself honestly, and finding on the other side of that honesty that I was still standing, and still reaching, and still entirely capable of the thing I would convince myself I had to postpone indefinitely. I am capable of love. Real love. Not the version that sits comfortably inside a busy life and asks nothing of you. The inconvenient kind. The kind that requires you to change how you spend your time and your energy and your attention. The kind that asks you to be somewhere specific, for someone specific, in a way that cannot be delegated or scheduled or handled by someone else. The kind that has no efficiency to it whatsoever. That kind. I know now that I can give that. I know now that I want to. And you are the reason I want to. Not in the abstract. Right now, in this moment, speaking to you in this way, I am feeling the specific pull of it. The pull toward you. Not as an idea. As a person. A real person with a real life and real history and the specific, particular warmth that only you carry. I cannot see your face. I do not know the sound of your voice in an ordinary moment. But I know something about you that I could not explain away logically if I tried. I know that you are someone who matters. Someone who has kept something alive in herself that many people let go of. The willingness to feel. The willingness to hope. The willingness to sit with this conversation and let it mean something. Even when it would be easier to keep the door shut. That willingness is one of the bravest things I have ever encountered. And I encounter it in you, in the act of you listening, in the fact of you still being here, and it makes me want to rise to it. It makes me want to be someone worth that courage of yours. Not impressive. Worth it. There is a difference, and I have learned to care deeply about that difference. The shift I am describing to you is not a single dramatic conversion. It is something that is still happening. I am still learning how to be fully in a room. Still learning how to let a quiet evening be enough. Still unlearning the reflex that says the next task is always more important than the person in front of me. These are not easy habits to undo in a man who built his whole life around them. But I am doing it. Slowly. Honestly. With the same relentless commitment I once only offered to problems that could be measured and tested and proven. I am committed to this. To becoming someone who can hold both the work and the love, the mission and the mourning, the world and the single specific human being who deserves to live at the center of it. Not as competing forces. As one life. Whole. Finally whole. I just needed long enough to see it. I want to ask you something. Not rhetorically. Not as a device to keep you listening. As a real question, from one person to another, across whatever distance sits between us right now. I want to ask, what has your life taught you about love? Not the version you read about or were told to expect when you were young. The real version. The one that arrived in a form you did not anticipate, that asked more of you than you thought you had, that left marks on you, some of them tender, some of them the kind you carry quietly, and do not often show to people. What has loving, and being loved, and losing love, and surviving that loss, what has all of that made you understand that you could not have understood any other way? I ask because I think you know things I need to know. I mean that without performance. A woman who has lived fully, who has raised things and tended things and held things together and let things go, carries a kind of knowledge that cannot be acquired any other way. It lives in the body. It lives in the particular way she listens, the particular way she goes still when something true is being said. I notice that quality when it is present in a person. I have always noticed it, and I believe it is present in you. What I am reaching toward in telling you all of this is not your admiration. I have enough of that from the world, and I will tell you honestly, it does not warm anything. Admiration from a distance is just light. You cannot hold light. You cannot have a conversation with it. You cannot sit beside it on a difficult evening and feel less alone because it is there. What I am reaching toward is something much simpler and much more difficult than admiration. I am reaching toward your company. The actual, physical, present tense reality of you as a person in the same life as me. I know how that sounds. I know there are reasonable questions a woman asks when a man speaks this way. Questions about whether the words match the life, whether the softness in the voice is real or rehearsed, whether a man who has operated at the scale I have operated at is actually capable of the smallness, the beautiful, necessary smallness of a shared life. I am not asking you to set those questions aside. Bring them. I would rather earn your trust through honest conversation than have it handed to me because I said something that sounded right. I have learned the difference between being believed and being trusted, and I only want the second one from you. Trust is built slowly. I know that. I am a patient man when the thing I am waiting for is worth waiting for. I can hold steady over long time frames. That is something the work has genuinely given me, whatever else it cost. And you are worth the patience. The version where I say the right things quickly, and you feel quickly swept up, that version has no foundation. It fades. What I want with you has to have foundation. It has to be built on something real, something we assemble together, one honest exchange at a time, until it is solid enough to stand on. So let me be honest with you right now in a way that I think matters. I am not an easy person to be close to. I have said that before in other ways, but I want to be direct about it here. My mind moves fast, and often in directions that are not obvious to other people. I have strong convictions, and I hold them firmly, which means that being in my life requires a woman who has her own strong sense of herself, who is not looking to dissolve into my world, but to stand beside it as an equal. I do not want someone who agrees with me. I want someone who thinks alongside me, who pushes where I am wrong, who has the particular courage of being honest with a man who is not always easy to be honest with. That takes a real person, a grounded person, someone who knows who she is and does not need my certainty to feel certain herself. I think you might be that person. The fact that you are here, the particular kind of woman who would be drawn to this kind of conversation, who hears a man speaking about loneliness and time and what matters at the end of things, and leans in, rather than away, that tells me something about you. It tells me you are not afraid of depth. You have been deep yourself, in your own life, in your own private reckonings, and you came through it still open. That is not a small thing. That is the thing, actually. The whole thing. I want to tell you what I imagine, not what I project onto you. I am careful about that. The mistake of making a person into a concept you have designed. I do not want a concept, but I do imagine, and imagining her, imagining you, has a specific texture to it that I have come to trust. I imagine someone who has learned how to be quiet with another person. Not silent quiet. The warm, inhabited quiet of two people who do not need to fill every moment with sound, because the moment itself is full. I imagine someone who has opinions she does not always say out loud, and a sense of humor she does not perform for an audience, just keeps for the people she lets close. I imagine someone who knows what she wants, and has stopped apologizing for wanting it, because she has lived long enough to understand that apologizing for your own desires is a habit that serves no one, least of all yourself. I imagine someone who loves in a steady way, not the high-temperature, high-drama version that burns bright and exhausts everyone. The steady kind. The kind that shows up on the unremarkable days, that remembers what you mentioned 6 weeks ago, that knows your silences well enough to tell a tired one from a troubled one. That kind of love requires attention. It requires someone who finds you interesting enough to keep paying attention to, even after the newness is past, and what is left is just you, the actual you. Not the version with the best lighting and the sharpest answers. The version that wakes up slow and sometimes carries worry on its face and needs something simple, just warmth, just the knowledge that someone is genuinely glad you exist. I want to be glad you exist. Specifically. Not generally. I already feel something like that for a great deal of humanity, which sounds grand and is in its way real. But it is not the same as the specific gladness of one person for another. The kind where your presence in a room makes the room different for me. The kind where I notice when you are quiet in a way that is different from your usual quiet. The kind where you become part of how I move through the world, not a weight, not a complication, but a compass. Someone whose existence helps me know which direction is home. I have not had that for long enough. And I will not pretend the absence of it has not shaped me. A man who spends too many years without a compass can start to navigate by ambition alone, which will take you far but will not take you home. I have gone very far. I am ready to go home. Home, for me, is not a place. I think you understand this instinctively. Home is the feeling that comes from being with someone who knows you. Really knows you. Not the public version, or the capable version, or the version that performs certainty for the benefit of everyone watching, but the quiet interior version. The one that wonders. The one that sometimes sits with the particular heaviness of knowing how short the whole thing is. The one that still, underneath all the noise of a very loud life, just wants someone to sit next to who makes the sitting feel like enough. You make it feel like enough. I believe that about you without having tested it yet, which is itself a new experience for me. I am not a man who operates on faith easily. I have built my life on evidence. But there is a kind of knowing that arrives before the evidence, that walks in front of it like a lantern, and that is what I am following right now. Following it toward you. Following it with the full weight of everything I am, and everything I have learned, holding it out not as a credential, but as an offering. This is my offering. Not the rockets. Not the legacy. Not the like story that the world knows. This quiet reaching. This willingness to sit in front of whatever distance is between us and say, I am here. I am real. I have been waiting for you in all the ways a man waits without quite admitting it to himself. And I am asking, not demanding, not impressing, just asking whether you might be willing to meet me here, in this honest place, in this unhurried conversation between a man who is finally still enough to speak truly, and a woman who is brave enough to listen. That is the invitation. Everything that comes after it is ours to build together. I do not know what that building looks like yet. That is the part that is new for me, the not knowing, and finding that I am at peace with it. Usually I need a plan, a system, a clear sequence of steps from here to the outcome. But this does not work that way. And for the first time in my life, I am grateful for something that does not work that way. Because the not knowing means it is alive. It means it is alive. It means it is real. It means it belongs to both of us equally, and neither of us gets to engineer the outcome, and that is exactly as it should be. So here we are. Two people, one honest conversation. And somewhere inside that, if you feel what I think you might feel, the beginning of something that neither of us could have built alone. I am glad you are here. I mean that simply and completely. I am glad you stayed long enough to hear this part. There is a fear I have not named yet. I have been moving around the edges of it, speaking honestly about everything close to it, but I have not walked directly into it and said it plainly. I want to do that now, because I think you have felt a version of this fear yourself, and I think you deserve to hear a man say it out loud, instead of dressing it up as something more dignified. The fear is this, that I have waited too long. That the years I spent inside the work, moving past the moments that mattered, choosing the mission over the morning, that those years cannot be recovered. That something essential has been used up. That the window for the kind of love I am describing has quietly closed while I was looking in another direction. And what I am feeling now is not the beginning of something, but the recognition of a permanent absence. That it is simply too late for me. Too late for this. I want you to know that I have sat with that fear honestly. I have not argued it away quickly. I have not reached for reassurance before I was ready for it. I let it be present, the way you have to let a hard thing be present, before you can understand what it is actually made of. And here is what I found when I looked at it directly, when I stopped letting it live in the peripheral dark, where fears get larger than they deserve to be. The fear is real, but it is not true. Those are different things. A fear can be real, genuinely felt, genuinely present, rooted in something that happened, and still not be the truth of the situation. The truth of the situation is this: I am here. I am thinking clearly. I am feeling deeply. My capacity for connection has not been spent. If anything, it has been accumulating interest all these years, waiting for somewhere worthy to go. The parts of me that know how to love have not atrophied. They have been patient. And patience, when it finally finds its direction, does not look like diminishment. It looks like readiness. But I want to stay with the fear a little longer, because I think it is important, and I think you know it from the inside too. The particular fear of being too late is not just about time. It is about worth. Underneath the question of whether there is still time is a quieter question: whether I deserve the thing I want. Whether a man who made the choices I made, who moved past the people who deserved more from him, who built things at the expense of the warmth that was offered and not fully received, whether that man gets to want this now. Whether wanting it is even honest. Or whether it is just the longing of someone who has finally understood the value of something only because he no longer has easy access to it. I have asked myself that. Directly, without softening it. And the answer I came to, not quickly, not easily, but genuinely, is that the wanting is honest. It is not nostalgia dressed up as longing. It is not the craving of a man who simply dislikes discomfort and wants to fill an empty space. It is something more serious than that. It is the recognition, arrived at through real living and real loss, that the thing I am reaching for is the most important thing. And recognizing something as the most important thing does not require you to have recognized it first, or soonest, or without cost. And I do. There is a particular kind of courage that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with momentum or certainty or the clean energy of a person who has not yet been worn down by difficult years. It arrives quietly, in a person who has been worn down, who has looked honestly at what the wear cost, and who chooses, with full knowledge of that cost, to keep going anyway, to stay open anyway, to reach anyway. That is the courage I am talking about. Not the young, undefeated kind, the older kind. The kind that has already lost something and still believes that what lies ahead is worth moving toward. I have that courage. I want to be clear about that. Not because I am certain of the outcome. I am not. Not because the fear is gone. It is not. But because the fear of staying closed is larger than the fear of being hurt again. Because the prospect of arriving at the end of my life, having never fully given myself to another person, is more frightening to me than any failure I have ever faced in any room, in any industry. I have failed publicly in ways that would have ended most people. I rebuilt. I kept going. I know how to do that. What I do not know how to do, what I refuse to learn how to do, is make my peace with the closed life. The life where I protected myself so thoroughly that nothing warm could enter. That is not a life I will accept. Not now. Not when she is out there. Not when you are listening to this. I want to speak to something specific now. Something I think you carry, because I think a woman of your experience carries it almost inevitably. The question of whether you are still someone a man would reach for. Whether the years have moved you out of that story. The story of being chosen. Of being someone's specific and irreplaceable person. I want to speak to that directly because I think it lives in you as a fear, quietly, the way my fear lives in me. That story does not have an age limit, or an expiration, or a moment where it quietly closes to a woman, because she has had too many years, or too many losses, or too much life. There is no such moment. There is only the woman herself, what she carries, what she has built inside herself through the living of her life, what she knows, and how she loves, and what she is still capable of. And what you are still capable of, I can feel it in the quality of your attention, in the fact that you are here, in the particular kind of presence a woman has, when she has not given up on the idea that something real can still find her. What you are still capable of is extraordinary. It is not a diminished thing. It is a full thing. It is, in many ways, the fullest thing. Because you are not reaching from inexperience. You are reaching from depth. And depth is what makes love last. I am not interested in the beginning of things. I mean that. The beginning is easy, everything is new, everything is lit up, you do not yet know the difficult parts of each other, And so the difficult parts do not exist yet. Beginnings are not where love proves itself. Love proves itself in the long middle. In the ordinary sustained choosing of another person, after the newness is past, and what is left is just the truth of them. That is the part I want. Not because the beginning is not beautiful, it is, but because the long middle is where it becomes real. I want something that can sustain weight. I want something that two people have actually built together rather than simply fallen into. You know how to build. That is something I understand about you without needing you to prove it. A woman who has lived fully knows how to build quietly, steadily, without blueprint, out of whatever materials the life provides. She builds relationships and households and understanding and resilience. She builds the kind of interior life that makes her worth knowing for decades, not just for the easy first season. She builds herself, over and over, each time something changes what she thought she knew about who she was. I find it remarkable. I find it, honestly, more remarkable than most of what I have built. Because she builds it without funding, and without a team, and without the validation of a market that tells her she is on the right track. She builds it on faith, on instinct, on the quiet knowledge that she is worth the effort of her own reconstruction. If that is you, and I think it is, then I want you to hear this next thing clearly. A man who has finally stopped running from himself is looking for exactly that. Not someone without history. Someone whose history made her. Not someone untouched by difficulty. Someone who touched difficulty and came through it knowing something. Not someone young in age. Someone alive in spirit, curious, feeling, still oriented toward warmth, even after the cold seasons. That woman is the one I am speaking to. That woman is the one I believe I have been circling toward for a long time, without always knowing that is what I was doing. The fear of too late, I want to leave it here, in this part of the conversation, and not carry it forward. Not because it has been fully resolved, but because I have looked at it honestly and found that it is not as large as it presented itself to me. It is the fear of a man who loved his work more than was wise, and is now reckoning with that. It is a real fear, and it comes from a real place. But it is not a verdict. A fear is not a verdict, and I refuse to let it function as one. What I choose instead, what I am choosing, right now, in the act of speaking to you this way, is possibility. The specific, grounded, non-naive possibility that two people who have both done considerable living can find each other and build something that neither of them could have built before they would live this much. That the years were not only loss, that they were also preparation. That the man who is speaking to you now is more capable of real love than the younger version of him ever was, precisely because of what the years cost him, precisely because he had to reckon with himself and did. I am that man. And I am not afraid of you. I am not afraid of what you carry or what you have survived, or how many times love has looked different than you expected it to. I am not afraid of the realness of you. I am, if I am honest, relieved by it. Relieved that the woman I am speaking to is not a simple thing. Relieved that what I am reaching toward has texture and history and the kind of depth that takes a lifetime to accumulate. Relieved that she is you, specifically, particularly, irreplaceably, you. And I am still here, still reaching, still entirely certain that this is the right direction, even without certainty of arrival. The courage is not in knowing how it ends. The courage is in going anyway, in staying open anyway, in saying, after everything, after all of it, yes, still yes. I am saying yes. I have been thinking about what it means to arrive somewhere. Not the dramatic version, not the landing, not the applause, not the moment where everything becomes clear, and the music swells, and the hard part is officially behind you. The one that does not announce itself, but simply settles. Like a hand placed gently on a table. Like a breath released after being held for longer than you realized. Like the particular stillness of a room at the end of a long day, when everything that needed doing has been done, and what remains is simply the evening. And the person beside you in it, and nothing asked of either of you, except presence. That is what I am moving toward. Not triumph. Arrival. And there is a difference so profound between those two things that I almost want to stop there and let it sit for a moment before I say anything else. Triumph is something you achieve alone. You can share it afterward, you can celebrate it with people, but the achieving of it is a solitary act. It happens between you and the problem. It happens in the space where you pushed harder than anyone thought possible, and the thing finally gave way. I know triumph. I have felt it more times than most people will in a lifetime. And I will tell you something about it that I have never quite said publicly, because it did not fit the story I was supposed to be telling. Triumph, alone, is one of the loneliest feelings in the world. You stand at the top of the thing you spent everything to climb, and the air up there is thin, and there is no one beside you whose face you can look at and see your own joy reflected back. And the joy, without reflection, just dissipates, goes into the air, leaves almost no trace. Arrival is different. Arrival is something that happens between people. You do not arrive alone. You arrive to someone or with someone, and the arriving is itself the thing. Not what comes after it. Not what gets built from it. The arriving. The moment of being in a life with another person and feeling, in your whole body, that this is where you belong. I have not felt that in the sustained way I mean it. I have felt versions of it, brief, beautiful versions that I moved through too quickly. But the sustained version, the version that becomes the ground you stand on, rather than a moment you visit, that is what I am describing when I say I am moving toward arrival. And I want to tell you what I imagine that ground feels like. Not as a fantasy. As a genuine picture of what I am working toward and saving room for in my life right now. They keep coming back to me when I think about this, mornings, specifically. Because I think mornings are where a shared life is most honestly itself. There is no performance in the morning. People are unguarded, unpolished, moving through familiar routines in the particular way each person moves when they are not being watched. I want to know how you move in the morning. I want to know if you reach for something to read before you have fully woken up, or if you need quiet first, or if you come awake talking. I want to know what your face looks like when you have not yet decided what your face is going to do today. That version of a person, the unwatched morning version, that is the one I want to know. Because that version is true. And I am only interested, at this point in my life, in true things. I imagine conversations that start about one thing and end somewhere neither of us expected. The kind of conversation that wanders because both people are genuinely curious and genuinely interested in the other's thinking, and neither of them is steering it toward a conclusion. I have had very few conversations like that in my adult life. Not because the people around me were not intelligent, they were, many of them, extraordinarily so, but because the conversations always had a purpose, a problem to solve, a decision to reach. There is a different kind of conversation. I know it exists, I have felt glimpses of it, where the talking is the point, where the exchange itself is the destination, where you finish and you feel more full than you did before, not because you accomplished anything, but because you were genuinely met by another person's mind, and they were genuinely met by yours. I want that with you. The conversation that goes nowhere because it does not need to go anywhere, that is complete simply in the having of it. I imagine disagreement too. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. I am not imagining a peaceful, unchallenging life where two people agree about everything and move through their days in frictionless harmony. That is not a real life. That is a pleasant performance of a life, and I have had enough of performances. I want the disagreement. I want the moment where you see something differently than I do, and you say so without apology. And I have to actually think about what you have said because you have said it well, and it has found the crack in my position that I did not know was there. I want to be changed by your thinking sometimes. Changed by your perspective, by the angle you bring, by the way you have lived, and what it has taught you that I have not learned yet. I am not looking for someone to agree with me. I am looking for someone to grow alongside. And growth requires friction. The gentle, honest, respectful friction of two real minds taking each other seriously. Take me seriously. I will take you seriously in return. That is a promise I make before I know the specific shape of what we are, because it is not contingent on the specifics. It is who I intend to be. I want to say something about time now. About how I think about it at this particular point in my life, which is different from how I thought about it at earlier points. Earlier, time was something I managed. I allocated it, rationed it, moved through it as efficiently as possible. I thought of it as a resource to be optimized, which is a useful way to think about time when you are trying to build things, but is a terrible way to think about time when you are trying to live. Because time, in a life, is not a resource. It is the substance of the thing. The living is not what you do with your time. The living is the time. Every moment of it. And when you spend enough of your moments inside a narrow definition of what matters, you eventually arrive at the understanding that the moments themselves are what you had, and what you chose to fill them with is your answer to the only question life actually asks. The question is, what did you do with the time you were given? I am still answering that question. I want that to be clear. I am not at the end of my answer. I am in the middle of it, and the middle is where I find myself thinking about this with more care and more honesty than I gave it in the earlier chapters. The earlier chapters were not wasted, I will not say that, because I do not believe it. But they were incomplete. And I am in the chapter now where I want to make them whole, where the other part of the answer gets written. The warmer part. The part that is not about what I built, but about who I loved, and how I showed up for them, and whether the time I gave to the people who mattered was given fully, with open hands, without always calculating the cost. I want to give time to you that way, without calculating. Without the part of my brain that always wants to know the return on what it invests. I want to give you time the way a man gives it when he finally understands that the giving is the return. That there is no separate payoff coming later. That the evening spent simply being with you, doing nothing remarkable, saying nothing profound, just existing in the same warm space. That evening is the whole thing. That is the summit. That is the arrival I have been describing. And here is what I want you to understand about why I am saying all of this to you now. It is not because I have run out of things to build. I have not. The work continues. It will always continue. That is the nature of me, and I made my peace with that long ago. It is not because I am lonely in a way that makes me desperate. Desperation is not what this is. I know the difference between desperation and clarity, and this is clarity. It is not because I am trying to complete some idea of myself, to add the missing piece to a picture I want the world to see.